So let's return to number one, which is returning to a flavor and nature practice. All right. It's actually pretty easy. So I'm just going to list some resources and we can find even more with an internet search. Once we have the basics, all we have to do is go back and look at the books we already have. You don't need a new book, just need a new perspective and read the flavor nature first, and then look at the actions and go, oh, that's why that does that, because it has that flavor and that nature, right? And then everything starts to make sense. We then need to look at the formula books, hopefully the Shanghanlun or the Jin-Hui, only because of the emphasis that Zhang Zhongjing places on adding or removing specific herbs from formulas. And then we say, the herb that was added has what flavor nature? Oh, because he wanted this to happen. This was removed because he didn't want sweet sticky or he didn't want acrid anymore. And then we start looking at things are added or removed based on flavor and nature, not because of its name. All right. The breadcrumbs of learning are all already there for us. We don't need anything new. And honestly, once we grasp this flavor and nature, if we don't end up with a big dent in our foreheads going like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. I've done a bad job of explaining this if you don't end up with a good bruise here after a few months of rearranging our thinking back to flavor and nature. Flavor and nature was established in the Neijing. For a crash course refresher, please look up the 4 excellent articles written by my wife, Julianne Nugent-Head, on classical herbalism. They were published in the Journal of Chinese Medicine. If you wish more information or a general overview, she has a 3-hour introductory video, The Neijing as Our Guide to Herbs. The title of the video kind of says it all for you, right? If you really want to get under the hood of the flavor and nature herbalism and see it reflected through each dynasty of China and how things shifted and how each famous herbalist applied it and the famous formulas we studied, she has a complete online training program, The Classical Herbalist, an in-depth training course. All of these, the articles are available from the JCM, the Journal of Chinese Medicine, and out there on the internet. The online courses, just go to our website, traditionalstudies.org, click the online learning, it'll take you to those platforms, and you can find all of that. So now we're at number 2. And this is easy once we accept number 1. Flavor and nature defined why people wrote the formulas they did. The famous formulas were not relying on the herbs listed, but the flavor and nature they possessed. A southern doctor, below the river, as they like to say in China, had certain things growing on their hill or down by their stream. So they grabbed that bitter or sweet herb and used it to cure the patient. It worked so well that they wrote down the ingredients, and the next thing we know, we think it was that herb that is necessary for success. But a northern doctor might treat the exact same condition with what was on hand, not just in their location, but in their season as well, because it's really hard to get Chetiansao or Pugonging in the middle of winter in the northeast of China when there's 6 feet of snow on the ground. All right. So if you run out, you're trying to dry it and it's out, you've got to figure out what's the flavor and nature that I can get off the bark of a tree. What about what evergreens are out there? All right. You get really creative. Flavor nature. But what happens is they get creative, they use something, they write down their success, and then we foolishly think we need that herb to tonify blood instead of any correct flavor and nature and personality. We have to rearrange our thinking. Now that brings us to number 3. It's the personality of the herb that makes a difference as we seek to go from a confident flavor nature herbalist to a comfortable and, more importantly, a practical one. We can then be more selective or flexible based on what is available and what we need to happen, and how fast we need it to happen. Grasping number 3 means while on holiday, we can walk into any supermarket and leave with the necessary flavor natures to fix what our family or friend came down with. There are radishes in the supermarket, right? I mean, it's not live foods, it's not the seeds of the radish, but it's going to make the stomach gurgle. It's going to make the intestines go. It's going to free up some blocked things, right? There's ginger in that vegetable section. There's cinnamon on the spice rack. There are cloves, there's barley, there's rice, There's bitter chard, right? You don't have dandelions, you need a really dark, nasty, bitter green. Go get the one everyone thinks is super healthy. Ta-da! You have a cold, bitter herb that if you brew up as a drink is going to clear heat toxins, right? You've got chilies if you need some spice. You've got scallions. You've got almond milk. You're like, what am I going to do? They're got a little bit of a cough. They're really achy. Get some almond milk, all right? Dates. They're not jujubes. They're not zao, but it's pretty close. Oranges. Peel off the skin. I mean, we haven't even hit the vitamin section of the supermarket yet, and we've already solved most illnesses, okay? Because the moment we hit the vitamin section, we now have access to vitamin C, right? Vitamin C works so well to beat a cold because it is cold and bitter. It is so cold and bitter that it says on the label, if you take too much of it, you'll end up with loose stools. Just like any cold, bitter herbs we give that damage the spleen, and we give them loose stools. So we get all worried about, well, I'm going to damage their spleen and they have loose stools. I've hurt their yang. In the meantime, our patients are ODing on vitamin C and as a laxative. I mean, perspective, right? If there's an herbiary wherever you happen to be or an essential oil store, well, I mean, we can do just about anything at that point because now we've got access to frankincense, to myrrh, you name it, we've got access to it. So it's this flexibility of thinking of what do I need to see happen? Flavor, nature, and its personality. What can I get? Not I need that herb. Now, as we hit number 4, I want to address an issue I hear as I talk about number 4. Matching delivery mechanism with illness and patient. And that's the issue of compliance. The truth is, there really is no problem of compliance, just the issue of poorly matching our delivery method and intensity with the illness and person being treated. In our clinic, as I said, for our internal medicine patients, over 95% of them are on herbs and they take their herbs. Now, some few don't or can't take their herbs for various reasons, but for the vast majority of our patients, they are taking raw herb custom formulas. Now, no practitioner has 100% compliance, and please don't let anyone tell you they do, and just don't buy that course if they promise you the secret to 100% compliance. People come in every flavor in nature, just like plants. There's going to be one that's not going to be compliant. But a high compliance to the point that it's rare somebody isn't compliant is easy to achieve if we are effective herbalists. The number one issue of compliance is the patient is just not that sick. So if the patient is not that sick, I personally, you look at me, right? I'm up here. I'm like got the golden retriever here. I mean, I'm 51, right? So I personally should be taking herbs all the time due to my insane travel and work schedule. I had a 5 a.m. flight on Friday out of Asheville, so I had to get up at 3. Fly to LA, have to treat patients there, catch the red eye last night, plane delay, change of crew. My plane doesn't end up taking off. I land in Newark, and 4.5 hours later this morning, I then get into the city in the middle of rush hour. Instead of arriving at 5 in the morning when I could just slip in, I get to arrive right in the middle of rush hour and sit in that car for an hour and a half from Newark. And then I get to the apartment, and then I've got a whole lot of things that I'm supposed to be doing. And then tonight, I have a 5 a.m. flight tomorrow morning out of LaGuardia because we have observers in our clinic that are there at 9 to see me treat patients. So I get about 4 hours tonight. I mean, I need herbs. I need a lot of herbs. Help, right? But I'm not run down enough to be consistent with a full formula, right? I mean, I'm traveling too much. What am I going to do, right? I only do carry-on. I do not check luggage. I travel way too much to check luggage, right? So matching the right herbs in a tea delivery mechanism makes sense for me, right? But if we shift our practice out of subacute or wellness patients and into treating really sick people, which is a lot more fun, okay? They are more than happy to give herbs a shot if it can regain their health and improve their suffering. Because they're really sick, they've come to us, we're usually not the first place they started, and they're desperate for a solution. And so that brings us to the second issue of compliance. If we don't get them obviously and tangibly better with our herbs, then we lose the willingness they gave us due to the severity of their condition. They're willing to take those herbs. They're really sick. And then nothing happened. We have a short window to win them over by really making a difference in one or more of their symptoms. We're not going to fix lupus in a week, but we can, in a week, dramatically change a lot of the discomfort they have. That they go, oh, herbs work. We have their attention. Now we can go in and keep working. And they're going to be very compliant. And it's our job to take advantage of that short window and actually be effective, that there's no other doubt. I mean, I get so annoyed when you have a patient who comes in and they get treated and they look up in 3 months and they say, yeah, I'm better, but I kind of changed my diet. I started exercising, so I'm not sure. It's like, what are we doing here if you cannot tell I am the principal factor that made you better, right? I mean, if changing your diet or going to the exercise, stop coming. Go do that. If it starts to come back, if you're not better, then we can have a conversation. But we have to be so effective that there is no discussion about whether or not the herbs made a difference. And at that moment, we can convert them into long-term dedicated herb drinkers who understand that this is the principal medicine they need. If we significantly shift the urgent diarrhea or the night sweats or the bone cold at night or the pain that they had, that there's absolutely no shadow of a doubt how effective the herbs are, we can keep their attention. But if they're not that sick to begin with, to merit the effort of complicated cooking and smelling up the house, or their family's going to be complaining the whole time, or we didn't shift them enough for them to be excited about herbal medicine, then compliance will be an issue. But it is our issue. It is not their issue. It's our fault if the majority of our patients are routinely non-compliant. We missed what we had to do for the person in front of us. We gave them a complicated treatment protocol of herbs, of what to do, add first, add last, have to stand in front of the pot, and they weren't that sick. Or we gave them, here's some pills, take those, and they're really sick. So they go, yeah, that doesn't work. It's up to us to match strength and intensity with what they have. So let's go back and let's look at flavor and nature, and then a group of herbs to use with flavor and nature thinking. And this is where we have that handout. It's the Neijing Su Wen, the flavor of herbs. And what's great about this chapter is the Neijing just lays it out really clearly, right? It's how a flavor affects the qi of the body. And I don't want to get lost in this quickly. I hope you will simply trust me in the following thing I say, that the flavor doesn't actually do something. The flavor affects the qi in the patient's body. The qi gets shifted and we see a change that we equate with their symptom. So any symptom a patient has, we should be able to describe it in terms of qi flow. Blocked, not blocked, too strong, too weak. But that gets really, that's like longhand. It's like the qi is moving this way and that way at this speed, but blah, blah, blah. Why not just say liver yang rising, right? When we have the classic definitions of illness that we have, the diagnoses in Chinese medicine, it's important to remember that liver yang rising, spleen yang deficiency, kidneys not holding, those are acronyms. LOL, OMG. I mean, I'm 51. I do not get this whole text world, but I have kids. And one time when my daughter was 15 or 16, she texted me like an entire letter, like an email, because I was like, don't text me. I do not read text. You send me an email. I got an email and I thought like it was like skip code. I was like, it's skip code or possibly a language with no vowels. And then I was like, okay, you have to tell me what this means, right? All of these things, liver yang rising, spleen qi, kidney, heart, etc., those are acronyms. And once we have that acronym, we need to be able to go underneath and say, and what that means is the qi is doing this and the qi is doing that, and it's this or that or that. And we have this long description of how we ended up with this acronym, LOL, OMG. Okay, a little bit sidetracked. But if we can remember that herbs affect the qi and therefore addresses the symptoms, it does not treat the symptoms. So end result is what we're paying attention to. And so let's look at that. The first one is acrid, right? 性能散能行. Acrid can disperse, can move or cause movement, right? 甘能补能缓能和. Sweet can build, can slow, can calm, can harmonize. 苦能泻能燥能解. Bitter can drain, can dry, can make firm, right? 酸能瘦能涩. Sour can gather, can astringe, right? Xian, neng, xia, neng ran. Salty can descend or purge, can soften. Dan, neng shen, neng li. Bland can permeate or leach or benefit or flow. And so if we think about acrid, classic acrid herbs, guijer, mahuang, xixin, gaobun, ginger, they're going to create movement. They're going to create a flow that we can take advantage of. I say, okay, I need to reach the extremities. I'm going to use some acrid to move. There's a big blockage. There's rheumatoid arthritis. There is something else going on. I'm going to need acrid to smack that blockage because I need to move things. That's what I need. I don't need an herb that treats something or other. I need acrid. Sweet, it can build, it can slow like sticky molasses, right? Things are going on, let's slow it way down. Let's clog them up a little. Let's nourish them a little. Let's make things have less edges. So if we are using something that's really acrid, really strong, and they're not at death's door, the way the old books talk, then we can use that acrid and then we can add a little sweet, which is why Gansao is in so many formulas. Oh, it harmonizes other herbs. But if the other herbs don't need harmonizing, what are we doing there? All right. And so if you look at Gansao, it's in a lot of the acrid formulas for head colds and things like that to take the edge off of those acrid herbs. Right? They're in the purging formulas because purging is really depleting. So we're going to sweeten feed them a little along with the purging. And of course, licorice just affects the heart flow. So it affects circulation. If you think about it, it's, oh, and it travels all 12 channels. Wow. No, I mean, it's making your heart go wong, 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 and things move around, better circulation or worse, depending on what's going on, right? Bitter. It's able to drain, to dry, to firm. And so this herb does not drain damp. This is a bitter herb. And bitter drains, damp goes away. But it doesn't drain damp. It's the fact that it's bitter and drying. And also it can make firm. So if things are too soft, too weak, we can use bitter to pull in. So we could use bitter herbs, a little bit of zixia for the kidneys, clear out what's kind of stuck in there, and then make it solid, hold something in. Salty or sour. Sour is great because it can gather it, it can exchange. I mean, wu weizi, it doesn't help the heart. It's sour. It gathers. The heart cheese stops having tachycardia because sour is holding it in place. And then you add some nourishing herbs in there, and the heart kind of goes, whoa, sour. Oh, 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 right? Lungs, weak cough, and it needs to be gathered. Sour, right? The patient who comes in, they're like, and you give them a ton of gualo and shingren, which are moistening, and they're going to end up like, right? They need to be gathered or acrid, right? We have to start thinking this way to be clear. Yeah, they have a cough. What kind of cough? What flavor is going to be the flavor that matches what I need to do? Salty. Salty can descend or purge or can soften, right? I mean, Mongxiao, or I prefer to use Yuan Ming Fan or Shen Ming Fan. It's the same. Yuan and Shen are the same thing, just at different time periods. They change the Yuan and Shen. Just because it's a nicer version of Mongxiao. It's Glauber salts, right? It basically salty. It gathers water and then you flush out. You don't have it on hand? Go to CVS or Dwayne Reed here in New York. We'll get some Fleet enema stuff before your surgery. That's what all it is. Magnesium supplements. They're all salty. They cause a flushing out of the system, right? That's how they can descend or purge, or they can soften. Salty goes in there and you can use it to help get rid of lumps, all sorts of things. But we have to be clear, which salty are we using? The purging kind or like the slower kind like Muli and Longu and Junjungu? Right? All are salty, but some are more purging, some can soften, right? Bland can permeate, leach, can benefit or create flow. And so it just, if the body's in a place where it's like holding, bland's going to allow it to kind of go, oh, ah. And then things just slowly slip and move without a loud attention. That's the great thing about bland, is it's kind of like the tricky. You know, it's like slow hand guitar. It's not like, it's like, but it really affects the body. All right. So to these flavors, We then grasp that we want to warm what's cold, cool what is hot. That's straight from the Neijing. I mean, everyone thinks the Neijing is this complicated book, and yes, but I mean, it also has really good things like if it's hot, cool them. If it's cold, warm them. I mean, it's kind of like good directions there, right? Some herbs are warm by how we experience it physically. So ginger, cinnamon, or cardamom are literally warm on our tongue or in our body or in our stomach. Some herbs are warm because they create movement of yang, like ma huang, fuzi, banxia, xixin, right? If you put ma huang or fuzi in your mouth, they're not warm like cinnamon or chilies. In fact, if you've never done it, put some foods in your mouth and you'll realize it's actually a little cooling at first. Like in your mouth, you don't feel any heat. So both are hot. One is hot because it's hot, like chilies, and one is hot because it's movement. And that's how you describe movement in Chinese as heat. It's yang. Okay? So we have to be clear about that. Some herbs are cool by experience, like mint or Asian pears. I mean, if you have a cough, cut up Asian pears, boil it in water until it's nice and gushy. Maybe add a little scallion and brown sugar or not. Settles that cough a child has so well. I mean, everyone has got boiling up pears in the winter in China, right? Because it's moist and cool and non-aggravating. We can use shurgao, or we can use fresh chrysanthemum, which instead of the dried, if you have fresh chrysanthemum or just slightly moist, it's actually very cold. Like you lose body temperature, your hands don't warm up afterwards. Dried, it clears heat through the urine, but not as cold. Other herbs are cool because they drain out yang. So huanglian goes in and it kills, right? Da huang goes in and it purges. Pugongyin goes in and it's cold to us because it is draining and getting rid of. And when you get rid of yang, what's left is less yang or coolness. So is it cold like mint, or is it cold because it's draining out excess and you're left with less? So we perceive cold, same as the warm. So just remember, some are warm or cool based on how we experience it in our bodies. Some are warm and cool based on whether they stimulated or lessened the flow of yin and yang in our body or qi in our body. Now, once we've got these concepts, flavor, nature, we don't need any specific herb, we just need flavor and nature. We need to start thinking about what is the plant? Sweet, not sweet, seed, bitter, root that grows a while, whatever it may be, right? We can build a pharmacy and write our custom formulas. So that brings us to the handout that has the list of herbs. It says something like 30 herbs plus 30 or something like that, right? Warm, accurate herbs to have on hand. And this is if you have your own pharmacy. I mean, here in New York, it's really easy. They'll fill it for you. They can deliver by messenger. It's there the next day. For those of us who are out in the hinterlands, you got to have your own pharmacy. So that's why I say on hand. But access to is a better way of saying it. Guajer, what a great, warm, accurate herb. I don't use a lot of rogue in my clinic. The next Practical Herbalist is coming out is on Guajer next Friday, so you can read about why. But Guajer, fantastic, warm, accurate herb. That is, it's the stems of the cinnamon tree. It's light, and yet it's warm, spicy, so it moves. Ganjiang, or dried ginger. I tend to use a lot of ganjiang even when I might use fresh ginger, because supermarket ginger is just not that strong. And I was in the Caribbean, and I was given real ginger, and it hurt. It was so spicy. I was like, ah! It was a terrible moment to realize that that was the first time in my life I'd actually had real ginger, and everything else was like ginger-like, pretend ginger. It's like 1 calorie ginger. I mean, what is up with that? So I will use dried ginger instead of raw ginger sometimes, because the dried ginger is not going to be it's like not Jamaican ginger that got dried. So at least it's got a little bit more punch to it, as long as the rest of my herbs are moist, right? But we've got ginger in there, which is strong and thick. So the warm's going to go in and be like, Guajer is going to go in and move. Ganjiang is going to be so warm that warm's going to spread like sunlight. So the rays of ganjiang or dried ginger reach parts of the body, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just so intensely warm, we feel warm this way. Whereas Guajer, we can actually kind of send it places. We can make it really move around the system. which is one of the reasons why it affects the heart, or we say it affects the heart, because it travels in the blood circulation, right? Jianghuang, turmeric, what a lovely plant or root that we can use as a warm acrid for a wide variety of things, not just what the book says. Gaobun, I put Gaobun in here because in the absence of Ma Huang, if you've got good Gaobun and you're careful about how you pair it, you can really get up into a head cold that is so thick and stopped up that other herbs just can't reach there. I mean, someone's got a head cold and we get 100 herbalists to write a formula, 99 of them are going to put in Baijiu. Baijiu is such a wonderful but mild, benevolent little plant that they put it when they cook lamb or beef in the stews to pull out some of that flavoring, that for Baijiu to actually have punch, to go through thick clogged sinus, that's thick yellow guck. They can barely breathe and they have a pounding headache because there's so much pressure up there. And little Baijiu is going to go up to the door and be like, ha ha! It's just not realistic. You have to have something that's going to go in and match that intensity. Ma Huang, wonderful herb. Hopefully it'll come back into practice. But Gaobun, as long as you pair it correctly, can have that punch, but it often is not enough, and therefore they just end up with a really bad headache. It kind of got halfway up and then didn't have enough, so you really have to pair it well. But that's why I have Gaobun in there. And then one of my favorite herbs, Jin-Huai. Jin-Huai it's really acrid more than warm, and it really gets them breathing, opens orifices. It's such a wonderful plant. And so we've got Guizhi, which can travel around the body and we can guide with heavy herbs or light herbs. Next week, you can read about it. Guizhi paired with Ma Huang or any other heart-racing herb or caffeine, and they'll sweat. Guizhi, you look at the old formulas, paired with Longu, paired with Muli, pulls it down into the lower dantian and warms low and doesn't cause a sweat. Guizhi doesn't cause a sweat. Guizhi is warming, and then pair it correctly. Pair it with something like Jin-Huai, and it will move up and toward the surface and clear out skin rashes that are cold skin rashes, fungal things because of poor circulation. All right. You put in some Guizhi with cold herbs, and you can really get circulation happening with no sweat at all. Right. When we get to Qinghao, Qinghao is a fantastic herb, and whether we use Guizhi or Ma Huang or Shigao, we can use the Guizhi to push that Qinghao through every little place in the body to go get those nasty spirochetes and bacterias and viri of latent pathogens. Because it does, Qinghao is a fantastic herb for latent pathogens, but it's just not going to get to the joints unless there's someone to drive it there. That's Guizhi. All right. So we start thinking this way. Warm, sour herbs to have on hand. Wu Weizi I talked about. Mugua. I don't believe that we should do cross medicine, but that doesn't mean we should be blind to the obvious. And if you are seeing a Western herbalism for poor digestion, you're probably going to end up with papaya enzymes. Right? It's a good thing. Naturopaths love it. Well, Mugua is unripe papaya. So yeah, it's sour. It's going to get things going. The juices in there. It's going to make things move. There's a whole lot of debate in Chinese, in the old books, about it helps the liver nourish the liver yin and the tendons. And then people say that just makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't do that. It helps the digestion. The spleen is stronger. There's better transportation. The muscles get nourished, and therefore they stop cramping. 6 one, half dozen of the other. But Mugua is great. Jinyingzi, another great sour holder that can really, paired correctly, could stop a night sweat without having to use when things like Longu, Muli, and Zhimu don't work. And you think, okay, what's going on? A little bit of that sour and then some herbs, cooling herbs, fantastic. Warm, bitter herbs to have on hand. I put Dongui here because Dongui these days, it's a cash crop. It's kind of like you go to the supermarket, you get a tomato, it's red, it looks like a tomato, has no flavor. Chinese herbs, there's a lot of cash crops. Chaihu is a cash crop. Huangqi is a cash crop. Dongui is a cash crop. And so they're sped grown. They're grown out of season. They're picked out of season. You can get Dongui any time of year, any place. It doesn't mean it's like the tomato. There's good tomatoes and not so good tomatoes. And a lot of the Dongui comes out today not sweet and plump. Traditionally, it could be sweet, acrid, or bitter. These days, I see it a little bit more bitter, or we use chendangui, the whole root, and that's really bitter. You can hear Julian tell stories of that. Warm, sweet herbs to have on hand, dazao or hongzao. You get the good plump ones if you can, not the little sugary ones. Otherwise, you have to use a lot. Gantao, right? Licorice. Shanyao, it's more neutral than warm, but it's sweet, it's starchy, it's nourishing. So when we need a sweet herb, we have these on hand, right? Cool acrid herbs to have on hand. Qinghao, I love Qinghao, right? Qinghao is absolutely fantastic because it does go in and get rid of deep things. Malaria is the famous thing. And now with all the reports and you get the patient does lots of research, they go, I know, but I'm cooking my Qinghao. Should I be soaking it in cold water and not doing that? It works no matter what you do, as long as you don't destroy it and extract it. Right? It's a great plant. And we'll be talking about a delivery mechanism that we prefer to use. And it works lots of different ways. It doesn't need to be soaked in cold water, only used that way. Chaihu, that's another great acrid cool herb. Bohe, shigao. There's a misunderstanding about shigao. Shigao is sweet and acrid, and only if you were to let it go for a really long time could it possibly be something that's more cold bitter. It's actually an acrid sweet herb, not bitter. Cold sour, right? Baishao, Baimalgun. That was missing. You couldn't get good Baimalgun for almost 2 years, so we stopped using it in our clinic. And recently it's come back. And Baimalgun's a wonderful, cool, sour herb to cool the blood, to hold the blood in place because if it's sour. Remember what sour does. So that's what that's doing. I love Baimalgun, but you do have to use very large doses because it's a very friendly herb. Same as Baishao. I mean, it's Shayao, Jiashao. You in the Shanghanlin, when they talk about using Shayao, they say you use a lot and then you have to use a lot more. Right? There's a lot of Shayao, heavy hand-to-hand dosage, because it's a very friendly herb if we want it to be cool sour. Cool sweet. I love Jermu. Jermu is one of my favorite herbs. Maimendong, I look at it and we're stuck because a good piece of Maimendong, it's plump, it's thick. I walk by the pharmacy, I grab a couple, I toss it in my mouth. And then you get a bag or two that's really small, nasty, dirty little kind of things. And then you don't prescribe it because we prescribe based on what's good on our shelves, but then you don't use it up. So you don't get to order anymore. Then you can't replace it. But we'll routinely look at what arrives and then just be like, we just have to toss this or send it back. It's not what we were looking for. So look at your Maimendong, look at your Tianmendong. I mean, a lot of the sweet, if you're not willing to pop it in your mouth just as it is, then it's not going to do that for our patients. Cool bitter herbs to have on hand. Huangqin, I'm a big fan of. Huanglian, just because we have to have Huanglian, it's so famous. Jin-Huai, Da Huang, Shugan. If you're not familiar with Shugan and you want to start getting into raw herbs, someone comes in and they have a cold and they have a throat, you give them Shugan. And they're cold, you give them a really warm formula with Shugan. If they are hot, you give them a cool moistening formula with Shugan. But Shugan is a wonderful herb. I often try to use herbs that aren't used a lot, not because I'm trying to be exotic, but if they're not used a lot, they're not a cash crop, and therefore they're probably still grown somewhat acceptably to be effective. So you'll look at a lot of my formulas and say, what's going on with these? And then a lot of people say, well, he's just showing off because he knows all these herbs. No, I know my herbs so well, I can skirt around cash crops and use same flavor in nature that's very effective, right? And then Jurdza. Jurdza and Jermu, there's a lot of things like Jurdza and it's going to hurt the stomach and it's used in vomiting formulas. I routinely prescribe 30, 50 grams of Jurdza and nobody's vomiting and nobody's getting sick. Okay, so there's a kind of like a myth about this. Doesn't mean everybody needs 30 grams, but 30 grams of Jurdza and 30 grams of Jermu and you have a really nice person, right? The number of times I've gotten a phone call from a spouse saying, I don't know what you did, but I need you to keep giving those herbs to my spouse because they're suddenly really nice, right? And it's just Jurdza, Jermu, and then tailored correctly for everything else. But it's just, you put those together and people just get nice. Salty herbs, Yuan Ming Fun or Shen Ming Fun, it used to be called Shen Ming Fun. Then an emperor had the Shen character in his name. So in the north, once an emperor has, it's called once an emperor has had a character in his name or a famous person, that character is no longer used. It's been held by that person. So everything that became Xuan became Yuanming. So Yuanming Fan. The gates in Beijing changed their names because of that. So same herb or Mangxiao. I just like the powder better. Muli is a great salty herb. Longu is a great salty herb. Now we're talking about that idea of descending or softening. Yuanming Fan is going to give you loose stools, but Muli, if you're not careful, it's also a little su or acerbic. What do they call it in English? So somewhere I translated in here. Um, Slowing down. So Muli actually can be quite constipating for people. So both are salty. We just need to know which one's more purging for water, which one's more softening out, right? Longu, I'm a big fan of Longu. And then I use a lot of, I didn't put it here, but I use a lot of Junjumu to avoid using Muli or Longu just because it's cheaper, and I try and strategize a lot of my formulas based on price for my patients. How can I lessen the price of the delivery? Given that I write a large dose formula when needed, I don't want any of my patients leaving with a $15, $20, $40 formula. It just doesn't make sense. As a not-for-profit clinic, we try and really demonstrate how to be good at this affordably. Bland herbs to have on hand. Fuling is a great bland herb, and danjuye. Danjuye is a wonderful herb that we should use. Bamboo leaves, right? What's nice about those, but particularly danjuye, is that they kind of leach out through the urine a lot of the thicky things